January 17th, 1943. A bitter wind cut through the frozen plains of Eastern Europe. Snow crunched under worn boots, and the distant rumble of engines echoed across the ridgeline. Smoke curled from scorched trees, mixing with the fog of early morning, carrying the sharp tang of gunpowder. At the edge of a shallow valley, a lone anti-tank gun waited, its barrel etched with frost. The gunner, hands numb but steady, scanned the horizon. Through the gray haze, the silhouettes of Panzer tanks crawled slowly toward the ridge, confident that the terrain shielded them from harm. Their armor gleamed faintly in the weak winter sun, each vehicle a moving fortress. He had only seconds to decide. The ridge promised cover for the enemy, but it also offered an angle, an elevation few would dare exploit. One miscalculation would cost lives. One perfect shot could change the course of the skirmish. The wind bit harder, a warning or perhaps a signal. Somewhere in the distance, a shell struck the frozen earth, sending shards of ice into the air. This was the moment the gunner chose his gamble. The ridge held its secret, until the first shot rang out. Winter 1943 had hardened the Eastern Front into a frozen battlefield of endurance and calculation. The Wehrmacht, still reeling from the Soviet counteroffensives around Stalingrad, faced a relentless push from Red Army forces determined to reclaim territory. Snow blanketed villages and forests alike, transforming familiar landscapes into treacherous expanses of ice and frost. Supply lines strained under the cold, and every decision, from movement to engagement, carried lethal consequences. In this sector, a small German outpost held a seemingly inconsequential ridge overlooking a winding valley. On paper, it was just another high point, strategically minor, yet its elevation made it a natural choke point. The ridge's shallow crest offered visibility over the surrounding plain, a vital advantage in a war increasingly dominated by mechanized columns. Intelligence reports had confirmed Soviet armor movement nearby, and reconnaissance skirmishes suggested that a Panzer column was advancing slowly, testing German defenses. The gunner's unit, a small anti-tank detachment equipped with the formidable 75mm PaK-40, had endured constant pressure from advancing Soviet tanks. Each encounter demanded rapid calculation, nerves of steel, and a keen understanding of terrain. The guns were positioned to cover known approaches, but the ridgeline created a shadow, an area where enemy crews assumed they were safe from direct fire. Previous engagements had shown the lethal efficiency of well-placed anti-tank fire, yet no one had exploited this particular angle before. As the morning light filtered through the frost-laden trees, the gunner prepared his weapon, tightening bolts and checking the sights. Around him, the men whispered tactical adjustments, the air thick with anticipation. Outside the immediate bubble of their trench, the valley stretched wide, silent except for the occasional distant rumble of engines. Every sound carried significance. Every shadow could conceal an approaching Panzer. The stage was set. The ridge, the valley, and the frozen earth beneath them all awaited the first strike. It was here, in this intersection of human calculation and mechanical might, that a single decision would test courage, skill, and the unforgiving mathematics of war. The moment of choice was approaching, and the ridge kept its secret. For now, the anti-tank unit was small but disciplined, a handful of men who had endured months of attrition and harsh winters. Their PaK-40 gun, a robust 75mm piece, was capable of piercing the thickest Soviet armor of the period, yet it demanded precision and careful calculation. Each round weighed heavily, not only in pounds, but in consequence. One misfire could alert the enemy or leave the unit exposed. The gunner, a seasoned soldier in his late 20s, had earned his position through skill and composure under fire. Today, He faced a challenge unlike any previous engagement. A ridge that concealed the approaching Panzer column, offering both a tactical obstacle and an unprecedented opportunity. Reconnaissance reports indicated at least 4 medium tanks advancing in a staggered formation, with accompanying infantry and supply vehicles. The enemy assumed the ridge would shield them, a blind spot created by the slope and the angle of approach. The gunner's commanding officer had surveyed the terrain earlier and recognized the potential of an elevated shot, an approach few would dare attempt. Yet the plan carried risk. The gunner would have to aim high, calculating trajectory with only minimal observation, exposing himself to counterfire if discovered. Around them, the battlefield remained eerily quiet. The snow-muffled movement, the distant trees swayed under the weight of frost, and the horizon shimmered with heat rising from distant artillery strikes. The men prepared their positions, adjusting sights, checking shell integrity, and noting enemy angles. Each adjustment was meticulous. Hesitation could be fatal. Morale was taut, a mix of anxiety and determination, knowing that their actions could tip the balance of the skirmish. The Panzer column moved slowly, armored silhouettes emerging as shadows across the valley floor. The unit waited for the decisive moment, the gunner's mind calculating angles, wind, and distance. This was not just a battle of firepower, but of foresight, courage, and the unforgiving mathematics of war. As engines drew nearer, the ridge held its secret for a final moment. Every soldier knew the coming instant would define the engagement. It was here, poised between uncertainty and opportunity, that the gunner prepared to take the shot that no one expected. From a tactical perspective, the ridge offered both peril and possibility. Most units would engage from the base, exposing themselves to frontal assault. But the gunner recognized a rare advantage: elevation. By firing from the crest, he could achieve a plunging shot, targeting the thinner upper armor of the Panzers. This approach required precise calculation. Range, shell velocity, wind, and the slight slope of the terrain all had to be accounted for within seconds. It was a gamble, one that could decimate the enemy or leave the unit vulnerable. Leadership played a quiet but critical role. The commanding officer, aware of the danger, trusted the gunner's expertise. In small units, decisions relied heavily on individual initiative. Orders were brief, yet responsibility immense. A single misjudgment could cost lives and compromise the mission. The tacit understanding between leader and gunner, born from prior engagements, allowed the operation to proceed without hesitation. Command endorsed the gamble, but the execution rested entirely on one soldier's precision and nerve. The human angle amplified the tension. Frost-bitten hands gripped cold metal. Breaths formed clouds in the frigid air. Men held their positions, hearts hammering, aware that any sound could betray their location. Fear existed alongside discipline. Adrenaline sharpened focus. In the midst of uncertainty, a quiet resolve emerged, an understanding that survival depended on skill, timing, and the courage to act decisively. Technological factors dictated opportunity. The POC-40, though cumbersome, was capable of piercing armor at long range. Its sights allowed for angle correction, but only if the operator remained calm under pressure. The gunner's understanding of shell trajectory and armor weak points transformed machinery into lethal precision. Every mechanical adjustment, every calibrated click, became a lifeline in the frigid morning. From the enemy perspective, the advancing Panzers moved with confidence. The crews believed the ridge offered natural concealment. Reconnaissance had failed to detect the anti-tank gun, and the men relied on standard formation tactics. They did not anticipate that elevation, calculation, and one resolute gunner could turn their advantage into vulnerability. The stage was set, tension thickened, and every angle pointed toward the moment of decision. The psychological dimension weighed heavily on both sides. For the gunner, it was a delicate balance between fear and focus. Each tank approaching the ridge represented a moving target and a potential death sentence. Yet fear sharpened his senses rather than paralyzed him. He visualized the trajectory, calculated the angles, and trusted his training. Every heartbeat was synchronized with the rhythm of war, measured, deliberate, controlled. Morale within the unit hinged on this single act. The men knew that a successful strike could disrupt the enemy column and inspire courage beyond their numbers. Conversely, failure might expose them to retaliatory fire, risking annihilation. In war, human resilience often lies in fleeting moments, when confidence and action converge. This was such a moment. Technological insight further defined the outcome. The POC-40's shells were designed to penetrate even the thickest armor, but only when fired correctly. High-angle shots were rare, almost experimental, requiring mastery of ballistic principles and intimate knowledge of the gun's capabilities. The gunner's decision to elevate was a calculated risk, exploiting both the physics of artillery and the blind assumptions of the enemy. From the perspective of the Panzer crews, the ridge was a promise of security. They advanced slowly, confident that the terrain offered cover from direct fire. Crews relied on visual reconnaissance and prior experience. None anticipated a shot from such an extreme angle. Their overconfidence would prove fatal. Finally, the moral and ethical dimension lingered subtly in the background. War demands precision in life and death calculations. The gunner's choice, aiming at enemy armor hidden from view, was as much a test of courage as it was of skill. Each shot was both destructive and necessary, a reminder of the harsh realities of combat, where survival and duty are intertwined. As the tanks drew closer, the calculated gamble crystallized. Elevation, timing, human nerve, and mechanical precision aligned perfectly. Every angle, every perspective pointed toward the imminent turning point where decision would meet consequence. The ridge, once passive and silent, became the stage for a single decisive act that would echo across the battlefield. January 17, 1943, 09:42 hours. The 1st Panzer approached the ridge, its tracks crunching over frozen earth. Visibility remained low, a haze of frost and smoke blurring outlines, yet the gunner's eyes remained fixed. His hands gripped the POC-40, cold and numb, every nerve taut with anticipation. He adjusted the elevation, a fraction higher than conventional firing doctrine recommended. Calculations ran through his mind. Distance, angle, wind, shell weight, all variables that could decide life or death. The gunner exhaled, steadying his breath, and pulled the trigger. The first shell soared in a high arc, disappearing momentarily behind the mist before striking the Panzer's upper armor. Metal shuddered, the tank halted, smoke curling from its turret. Shock rippled through the remaining column. The 2nd Panzer entered the kill zone. The gunner, now fully in rhythm, recalibrated, accounting for the slope and slight drift from the wind. Another shell flew, striking its mark with lethal precision. The column's formation faltered. Engines roared in confusion. Crews scrambled to assess damage. The once confident advance dissolved into chaos, a calculated gamble now manifest in fire and wreckage. Nearby infantry took cover as the anti-tank gun unleashed its measured fury. Snow and ice flew into the air as shells detonated, and the valley erupted in noise, metal tearing, engines stalling, and the distant crack of secondary explosions. Every moment stretched, condensed, and compressed into a tense ballet of calculation and chance. From the Panzer perspective, the ridge had become a lethal trap. Crews, who had assumed safety behind terrain, now faced destruction from an unexpected angle. Their confidence shattered, hesitation set in, and the advance stalled. The gunner, unshaken despite the chaos, prepared for the next target. Each calculated shot reinforced the potency of elevation, precision, and nerve. One man, one gun, had transformed a ridge into a crucible, turning an ordinary tactical engagement into a battlefield turning point. The valley trembled under the roar of engines and exploding shells, setting the stage for the decisive conclusion of this daring gambit. By 09:55 hours, the Panzer column was in disarray. Smoke curled from overturned tanks, their engines choked with ice and debris. The initial shock had slowed their advance, but the gunner knew hesitation alone would not end the threat. He adjusted the Pak-40 again, calculating angles for the remaining armored vehicles. The ridge amplified every sound, the groan of metal, the crack of exploding shells, the frantic shouts of crews scrambling to regain control. Each shell found its mark, striking the upper armor, igniting fuel, or incapacitating tracks. Chaos rippled through the valley. Tanks collided, wheels spun uselessly in the frost, and infantry struggled to regroup. The once coordinated advance became a fragmented retreat. Observers from surrounding positions noted the extraordinary precision. A single gunner, using high-angle fire, had neutralized a force many times larger than his own. The tactical brilliance of the elevation gamble was unmistakable. The gunner exploited physics, terrain, and enemy assumptions in a perfect convergence. Every shot was a lesson in calculated risk, turning terrain into a weapon and transforming one man's courage into battlefield advantage. The remaining panzers hesitated at the ridge's base. Some crews attempted evasive maneuvers, but the anti-tank fire had already disrupted their formations. Supply vehicles became collateral damage, mired in snow and rubble. The unit's small contingent of infantry pressed the advantage, moving to secure the ridge while the panzer crews struggled to regain order. By 10:10 hours, the engagement had reached its conclusion. The column, once confident and imposing, was reduced to scattered, immobilized wrecks. The gunner lowered the Pak-40, his hands shaking from cold and adrenaline, yet his focus remained sharp. Around him, his men exhaled in disbelief and relief. The gamble had succeeded. The ridge, which had hidden danger for the advancing panzers, now bore silent witness to their defeat. One gunner's calculated choice had turned a routine tactical scenario into a defining moment. The valley, scarred and smoking, would remember the precision, courage, and audacity of the anti-tank crew long after the engines had fallen silent. The valley lay quiet in the aftermath, a frozen graveyard of twisted metal and shattered treads. Smoke still rose from the remains of the Panzer column, curling into the gray winter sky. Engines that had once roared confidently now stood silent, their crews shaken and dispersed. The anti-tank unit, small and fatigued, emerged from their positions cautiously, scanning for any lingering threats. Their gamble had succeeded, but the cost of exposure reminded them of the razor-thin line between survival and destruction. Reports from nearby units soon confirmed the scale of the engagement. 4 medium tanks had been destroyed, several supply vehicles immobilized, and infantry formations thrown into disarray. Casualties were significant for the attacking force, yet remarkably minimal for the defenders, thanks to the precision of the high-angle fire. The gunners' decision to exploit elevation had transformed a precarious defensive action into a strategic triumph. Commanding officers quickly recognized the effectiveness of this unorthodox tactic, documenting the engagement for review and potential replication in similar terrain scenarios. Morale within the unit surged. The soldiers, once tense and uncertain, now understood the tangible impact of skill, courage, and rapid decision-making. Stories of the elevation gamble began to circulate among nearby positions, a quiet legend that emphasized how one individual's foresight could alter the momentum of battle. For the Panzer crews, the loss was both tactical and psychological. Confidence had been shattered. Their assumed advantage behind the ridge had evaporated. Reorganization would take hours, leaving the broader front exposed and forcing commanders to reconsider both formation and approach in future operations. Strategically, the engagement had wider implications. The valley, though a minor segment of the front, had been transformed into a bottleneck that now served as a model for defensive positioning. Observers noted how terrain, technology, and human nerve had combined to overcome superior numbers, reinforcing lessons that would influence subsequent confrontations across the Eastern Front. The ridge, scarred but intact, silently witnessed the convergence of preparation, audacity, and circumstance. Yet the battle was not fully over. The consequences of this decisive moment would ripple through the days that followed. By midday, command reports arrived detailing the unexpected success of the anti-tank crew. Intelligence officers analyzed the destroyed Panzer column, confirming the effectiveness of high-angle fire from elevated positions. The ridge, once overlooked, had proven a force multiplier. For the first time, a single gunner's precise calculation and courage became a case study in tactical innovation. The Soviet units involved were forced to withdraw and reorganize. Crews recounted confusion and fear, noting that terrain they assumed offered protection had instead become a trap. Several tanks were abandoned, and mechanical failures compounded the disarray caused by the precise shelling. Communications between vehicles broke down under the pressure of chaos, further hindering any coordinated response. The psychological impact on enemy morale was immediate and profound. Hesitation replaced aggression, and caution would now define their operations in this sector. Within the German ranks, the anti-tank crew received commendations and quiet recognition. While no grand ceremonies marked the event, reports circulated that highlighted the gunners' daring choice, demonstrating how terrain, artillery, and rapid thinking could combine to offset numerical inferiority. Commanders noted that elevation-based targeting, though rarely attempted, offered a strategic option that could be replicated elsewhere if carefully calculated. The aftermath extended beyond the battlefield. The local front stabilized temporarily, providing neighboring units with breathing space to regroup. The destroyed Panzer column represented not only material loss, but also a temporary shift in operational momentum. Field reports emphasized that the engagement validated innovative defensive tactics and underscored the value of individual initiative within disciplined units. Despite the tangible results, the ridge itself remained unaltered, silent, frozen, and indifferent to the drama it had hosted. Its slopes bore the scars of fire and steel, a testament to the convergence of technology, human courage, and chance. Soldiers passing through would later recount the event as an extraordinary example of precision under pressure, a story where one man's calculated risk determined the outcome of a larger force. The battle's echoes lingered, shaping both tactics and morale across the sector. The ridge, once a hidden obstacle, had become a symbol of how decisiveness, skill, and audacity could redefine the rules of engagement on the Eastern Front. In war, moments of calculated courage can outweigh sheer numbers. The elevation gamble exemplifies how precision, terrain, and human determination intersect to redefine the battlefield. One gunner, faced with the frozen uncertainty of the ridge and the advancing Panzer column, turned knowledge into action, transforming risk into decisive effect. It was not luck, nor reckless bravery. It was the application of skill, observation, and the unflinching resolve that characterizes the soldier's craft. The ridge, indifferent to human struggle, bore witness to the convergence of these forces. What appeared to be a minor tactical feature became the stage for a confrontation that exposed both the limits of enemy assumptions and the potential of individual initiative. The anti-tank gun, a tool of destruction in any hands, achieved its full potency only because of the operator's foresight. Elevation, angle, and timing, elements that might have seemed academic in peacetime, became instruments of survival and strategy. Beyond the battlefield, this moment holds a broader significance. It illustrates that warfare is as much a contest of intellect as of firepower, where innovation can neutralize superior forces, and where human decision shapes historical outcomes. The destroyed Panzer column was more than a tactical victory. It was a testament to the enduring principles of observation, preparation, and courage under pressure. As smoke lifted from the valley and silence returned, the ridge remained unchanged yet forever altered in memory. History records the outcome, but the essence of the event lies in the quiet bravery of a single soldier confronting both fear and chance. One gunner's choice, executed with precision and nerve, reminds us that in the vast machinery of war, individual action can still echo across time, leaving lessons in courage, strategy, and the unforgiving calculus of conflict.